Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a fresh new episode of Social Confoes, when we bring the social back to conversations. And tonight we have our first female guest, and she's
Is
all
it
the
is it
way.
really?
Is it?
Is it really our
I,
first female guest?
yes,
Oh,
it
okay,
is.
okay,
And I'll give you the honors to introduce her, because I think you know her better than me. So,
okay. I'm gonna give a quick story because when I'm at events in the US, but everywhere in the world, I try to network and mingle with others, learn where people are from. And I think 2 years ago, I decided, okay, I need to do something extra. I started handing out Surinamese pins with the Surinamese flag on them wherever I went and made friends. And during the conference, this is one of the bigger conferences when it definitely comes to social media in San Diego, social media marketing world. And there was this woman walking by who looked like she was in total control of everything that was happening, and with orange glasses. And she looked at my jacket, and I had the Surinamese. I think it was this jacket. I actually have it here. She can confirm it or not, but I think it was this jacket which has the Surinamese flag on it. And and she was like, Suriname. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then I found out that she speaks Dutch, that she speaks Dutch, that she is from the Netherlands originally. And we started speaking. And basically, she has started impacting my life ever since. She doesn't take any credit for it, but a lot of the success and a lot of success which I accomplished in the field of social media, she has had an impact on over the past couple of years. So, without further ado, let's introduce Dorien Morin van Dam. Welcome to the show, Dorien.
Wow.
hi, Doreen.
Wow. That's about as a good of an introduction as I could have just imagined. Thank you, Jean-Luc. Hi, Diego.
Hi.
Yeah, awesome. I can't believe I'm the first female guest. What took you so long?
Well, we had to make it someone, with that stands out, and we see those orange glasses that Jean-Luc talked about. It's really, I think, iconic. And I have a feeling where that orange comes from, but we'll let you talk more about it in a bit. It's quite interesting to hear, really, because as Jean-Luc mentioned during the conference, he was walking around, and the disconnection between people. That you recognize the flag and the Dutch language. It's You sometimes take it for granted, but when you're in a country where they don't speak the language and you see something like historically similar, it really brings an instant connection between people. I've had this experience myself when I was abroad, and I think it's quite extraordinary. So, yeah, Doreen, welcome to the show, and glad to have you with us. But I gotta ask, when I saw those orange glasses the first time, I checked out your socials online, and there was one thing that popped up in my mind immediately, and that's Seth Godin. Not sure
Oh,
if you, yeah,
I know who he
because
is. He
he
copied
also
me.
he also has these iconic colored glasses every time he's somewhere, and I gotta ask: is that something coincidence? Is that some inspiration, or is it just no
Well,
connection at all, just
you
random?
know, you know why I wear them, because when I started my business 10 years ago, I had been in the US for over 20 years, but 100% Dutch, immigrated when I was 18. So I wanted to name my company or have something that identified myself as Dutch, right? So I, by accident, started wearing, it was a cardboard pair of glasses. Somebody has sent it to me for Koninginnedag, right? So sent it in the mail, a flat piece of, orange glasses. I put them on. I made that my profile picture, and I was locally networking. and two or three people came up to me and go, I know you from somewhere. And then you go, you're the one with the funny orange glasses in your Facebook picture. That's how that started. It was almost like accidental. And then I got my first pair of glasses that didn't have any, they're like non-prescription. And so I started wearing them. This is probably my 7th or 8th pair. But now my tagline is, you'll recognize me online and offline by my orange glasses, right? Because when I'm on stage, people remember. When I'm at a conference, people come to me and say, hey, I've seen you. I know you online. So it's definitely something recognizable. I know some people wear funny socks or funny suits, certain hair color, purple hair, pink hair. For me, it just happens to be the orange glasses, and it's worked really well. Now, Seth Godin probably just copied me, but at least I have the connection. The reason for orange is that I'm Dutch, right? So, have that homeland pride. That's why I wear them. But the other funny story to that is, when I started my business, I lived in South Carolina. And for those of you that are watching or listening and know anything about college football, South Carolina is home to the Clemson Tigers. So their favorite color is orange. So in South Carolina, people go, oh, you must be a Clemson fan. So that was kind of a funny thing that happened while I lived there. But no, I always tell people, no, it's because I'm Dutch.
Okay. So there's kind of an accident to it, but also very, very clear why. But you said prescription, is that correct?
That's correct. I actually don't need to wear them. Although now we're 10 years along, and I actually have a prescription sitting right here. I need to actually order my first glasses with prescription. But I haven't found some. I need probably every year or two I order some new frames, and I haven't found any cool orange frames, so I'm holding off. But yeah, I actually need to get some with prescription in them, but they've been fake for 10 years. It totally works.
Wow.
I need to get my Udo glasses on now. I almost feel like I have to wear my glasses also. Oh, that's a great story. But so you actually moved to the US when you were 18.
Mm-hmm. That classic going to the US as an au pair. I wanted to go as a high school student. My parents couldn't afford to send me. So finished high school, and I was like, I'm going to be an au pair for a year. And, while I was here, I met somebody and I ended up staying. So, been here for...
You don't have to say it, because then people want to guess your age. So
it's okay. It's been over 30 years. Let me just say it like that. It's been a long time. Yeah. I've lived longer in the US than I lived in the Netherlands. But those 18 years count for a lot. They really shape who you are. They shape how you think. They shape how you, how you process things. It is really, I am through and through Dutch. I'm very direct. All those things that you would attribute to Dutch people. I feel like I'm that. So, yeah.
Definitely. And yeah, it just shows through your personality and your branding, and you keep that in a higher guard as well. Because everything orange, and you just said, the Dutch love orange. We won't go into the history of the Dutch orange lineage, but it is very, very iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And you being able to utilize that as part of your brand, part of your messaging, is a really, really fun play on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta ask, after like moving, having decided to stay in the United States, how has that, I guess, was there a big difference between Europe and the US that you had to adjust to compared to if it was any other place like Suriname? You haven't been here before, but usually when people go abroad, there is this culture, shift or shock that you have to adjust to. Was that anything for you?
Well, I have to, in a way, no. There was a language barrier. I barely spoke. I mean, I'd had a couple of years of English in high school, like all the Dutch people. But they teach British English in the Netherlands, right? Not American English. And I had been, had a couple of years of French and German. The Dutch. I'm sure you too have to learn several languages. So when I came here, my English was really pretty limited. But here's the thing. I have moved from my parents' home into the home of a family to be their au pair. And I was really young at 18. So I never lived alone in the Netherlands. I had never moved out of my parents' home into my own household, into my own room, into my own, with a roommate. So I never did laundry. I never went grocery shopping on my own. I didn't do all those Dutch things. Like once you move out, you learn all those things. I learned them the American way. I learned how to cook in America. I didn't know how to cook. I didn't even know how to fry an egg. So I learned how to cook here. I learned how to do laundry here. I learned how to clean the American way. So not that I didn't do any of those chores at home, but I helped my mom and I wasn't in charge. So when I learned how to set up a household and how to integrate in society, those things were easier because I was younger. And what I hear from a lot of Dutch people that immigrate to the US, they compare everything. I can't get the laundry as white. My whites are dingy. I hear all these. I can't find this ingredient to make this recipe. Well, I don't have any of those issues. I have never had any because I learned everything here. So that I think has made it easier for me. And then the other thing is within the Netherlands, I had moved around. My dad was in the military. So I had moved around when I moved when I was 5. I moved when I was 10. And so moving to the different parts of the Netherlands, there's different dialects there. And I'm the middle one of 5 kids. And I was always the first one to adjust to that. I have a little bit of a hearing loss, but I have a very good ear for languages. So I was able to not only learn English, but really mimic. I learned English in Boston, really mimic that really quickly. So within 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 or 4, I lost most of my accent. So I have friends who've been here longer than me. And every time they open their mouth, somebody goes, "Where are you from?" Nobody asked me that. And they haven't in a long time. So that helps you integrate much more easily. The hardest cultural things, I think, for me have been, I don't have a history here, like a school history. Like people have friends from elementary school or friends from high school. I don't have that. And then the cultural references to music, to old TV shows. Those just, there were different things going on in the Netherlands. Plus, I grew up in a very sheltered household, very sheltered family. So I didn't go to the movies and I didn't do all of those things. So there's a gap there, I think, compared to my American, contemporaries.
I do want to move into that, Diego, if there's an opportunity to talk about favorite, because I want to know what's your favorite kind of music.
See, right now it's my favorite kind of music is probably folklore. Like I love the Lumineers. I love, like guitar music, good lyrics. Who else do I like? Let me say it this way. I like listening to music, but my kids are on Spotify and are on Pandora all the time. I don't ever turn on music and go, "Oh, I want to listen to music." I do that when I'm in the car and by myself and I'm really bored because I can't talk to myself. That's when I listen to music. So that's not a big part of my life, music. So does that make sense?
And movies?
Yeah, romantic comedies for sure. I really like series. I'm an avid reader, so I get hung up on these Netflix series or Hulu series because to me it's like a book. Starts here and ends here, and I don't care if that's 50 episodes. I need to know the end. So that's kind of an addiction here on my end where, if it was a book, you knew when it ended, and here it's like, oh, it's the end of season 1. Oh, there's another book. I need it, another season. I got to read it. So I really like the visual along with the sound.
I think what Jean-Luc was trying to get to is to see if you have any preference to Dutch or American music / shows.
No, not really. Having been gone from the Netherlands so long, remember when I left, there wasn't social media. So that wasn't really access to Dutch TV. Now you can go on YouTube. So I grew up with Doe Maar, Frank Boeiegroep, some of those.
Doe Maar has been recultured in more recent years. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I every once in a while I'll listen to that music. For a while in the 90s and early 2000s, I had a pretty big CD collection. So I would go to the Netherlands and my brothers or my sister would give me some music and I would listen to that. But now that you can find anything online, I've tried to find some Dutch stuff on Pandora, but I do like the music where they sing in Dutch, because then it has way more meaning to me, and it's almost like poetry to me, because I don't really I don't speak Dutch on a daily basis, so when I listen to the Dutch music, it really it feels like home. So yeah.
Cool. You just mentioned social media, but before we head into that, there was no social media back then. There's a question from the comments section. Was there any feeling of homesickness after, I guess, 5 years or something?
No. The homesickness came when my children were born. So my first child was born 8 years after I moved to the US. And so that's kind of when I realized, okay, my kids will not have American cousins, and the Dutch cousins are in the Netherlands. They won't have an opa and oma nearby. It's a very different family relation when they don't get to see my children grow up. And again, he was born before social media was really a thing. So with my first 2 children, I think we were taking pictures, going to the pharmacy, getting pictures developed, sending them in an envelope, and sending them over there. I think with my third and my fourth, there were some email pictures going around. But nowadays you could live stream a birth and what's going on with grandchildren. So it was a very different, that's when the homesickness kind of came. But I think that's a very normal thing around 7-8 years after you've been in the country. So that, to me, that makes really a lot of sense too. But I did speak Dutch to my children right from the start, and they're, except the youngest one who heard more English because the other ones were in school. They all speak Dutch. They have Dutch names, Dutch passports. So I've tried to keep that culture alive and give them a little bit of that. And like I said, they don't have American cousins because my husband's siblings don't have kids. So all their cousins are in the Netherlands. So it's important that they know them. And yeah.
Yeah, and this all in a time where there was no social media. So how did you even end up as what you are now, a social media strategist?
Well, that's interesting. So my youngest son was born in 2005. And so when he was going to start, or when he started kindergarten in 2010, I had basically been an au pair, a nanny, and then a stay-at-home mom for all the years I lived in the US. I had not worked outside the home. And so all of a sudden I have 4 kids in school. What am I going to do? I have 4 kids. What am I going to do? Like all this time I had volunteered in the community, volunteered at my church. But now I had 7 hours a day. My husband, in the meantime, had had his own business for a lot of years. And he's like, can you figure out this Twitter thing? So he kind of was asking for help with marketing his business. And I found an online course. Again, remember I told you that earlier, how I learned with the music, and Netflix works for me, videos worked. So I started kind of watching the videos, and then I'm very much a doer. So I watched some videos, I learned a little bit of stuff, and I just was like, I'm creating a LinkedIn profile. So I created a LinkedIn profile, put on there, I'm a social media manager, gave myself a title, and somebody, local charity said, hey, we don't have any social media. Can you help us? Apparently in my town, I was the first social media manager. So I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, we can't pay you. So instead of paying me, they gave me a title, social media director. Now that sounds really good. So I put that on LinkedIn. Now I'm a social media director, not just a manager. And I ended up working with them for 3 years. And because of that, I was able to get paying clients, right? Because now I'm a social media director for this charity. It's really cool. And started getting local clients. So that's kind of how I got started. I just did it. And here's a funny story. I know you guys like stories. So about 3 months in, I started my business, created a website, don't really know what I'm doing. But I realized in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I was living at the time, that a lot of people wanted to know about social media. So I put together a social media workshop. Now, it's going to cost me $100 to rent a room at the local college. I was charging $20 a head. So I got 6 people in there. So you would think I'm ahead $20 for a 3-hour workshop. But it took me like 3 days to put it together. And as I'm walking out the door, I remember my husband looking at me and going, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just going to figure it out when I get there." And so that's kind of been my style. I've kind of rolled into a lot of different roles along the way. And if you look at a 10-year span in social media, that's kind of a long time to work in here. So things have evolved, things have changed. I've gotten in a couple different niches, and but that's kind of how I got started. I just did it, and I wasn't really worried about what other people would think of me, and I just did it.
I want to jump into that because somebody in the comments is laughing here. Ashna, thank you for joining in. And I think it's really fun because Ashna actually, she runs a restaurant. And at a certain point, she was like, I want to learn more about social media. So she did an internship with us while she had her own restaurant. She took an internship with Ineffable just to figure out the social media side of things. And of course, we were like, yeah, but don't you want to do this full time? You're pretty good at it. And she was like, no, my business. I actually did to learn about my business. So I think that's where the emoji comes from. And then Marvin asks, how would you compare, and this is more not from the business side, but I think also from the social side, how would you compare life before social media and now? What are kind of things that you're looking back and thinking like, whoa, this has really changed, or just this is the same?
There are some things that are much better with social media, but there are things that are way worse. And so I think finding that balance is good. Before social media, we had real meaningful conversations with people, right? It was great to go out with the girls, or with friends, and we would sit at a table and have real conversations. We would have dinner parties. We would go to, I lived at the beach, go to the beach and, really talk to the other moms and really have real true connections. But then it was really hard being away and being in a different country, not being able to talk to my parents very often, and my kids not being able to see them. And so now that there is social media, it's that double-edged sword. It's awesome. The kids can WhatsApp with cousins. We can do FaceTime. We can, I can call my brothers for free on WhatsApp. It's all wonderful. But then all we're doing is having this phone in. It's like an extension of that's what I feel sometimes, extension of my hand. It's just there. And so one of the things that we've done, we've moved to a very rural area. About a year and a half ago, we moved from South Carolina, which is in the southern part of the U.S., to Vermont, which is one of the most northern states near Canada. And we're in a very rural area where we do skiing and hiking and biking and fishing, and we're outside, and we spend a lot more time off our phones. And then the other thing that I've done in my business, which is a little different, I really try to be off my phone on the weekends. So really not, at least if I have to do some work, I'll go on my computer, but not have my phone on me at all times. So that really makes a difference. But yeah, life has changed. And I'm not saying it's not bad, But sometimes the good old days when we, on Sundays, we would just play board games all day, and that's what we did. Now kids just watch YouTube videos. It's a different, especially, I'm glad that when my kids were little, a lot of these things weren't around. I think we got our first home computer for the kids when the oldest one was 11, 10 or 11, and they might have gotten like a PlayStation after that. But they really didn't watch very much TV, and they really didn't play all the time. My youngest, he started playing games when he was 6 or 7. So he's been on the computer a lot longer. But yeah, it's kids don't really know how to do some of those things anymore. So,
it's interesting that I want to jump into this because it's interesting that you bring this up. My children were basically born and raised, they're being raised now with phones in their hand.
Mhm.
But when I put out a gaming board to play an actual physical game with them, or I want to do sports with them, my son loves to play football, like soccer.
Yeah.
They immediately let go of the digital activity that they're doing.
Mhm.
My daughter likes to read. We, at a very young age, decided we're going to read stories to her from a book every night.
Mhm.
And that kind of engaged her with her making it easy to take out a book and actually read. So I do think this is something in society we take for granted, especially if you're busy. If you're a busy parent, you work 2 jobs, you're so tired that you don't get to put in the effort. And I especially have respect for you since you have 4 kids. So 2 for me is already like, oh my God, this is not gonna end well. But I think we it's on one side, yes, it's very addictive, but on the other side, it also takes a little bit of effort to actually decide that you want to raise your children knowing like the screen is not the only thing. Because if they have nothing to do, they will refer to the screen, especially with Netflix and in the US, Hulu as well. You would just refer to the screen because, oh, okay, I'm not getting attention. Let's go to the screen. And if you can control that, I think it's very well possible to stay away. And I wish I had I'm trying to get there to put my phone away in the weekends.
I
It's
think,
really, really
yeah,
difficult.
I was going to say, I think the word that we're looking for is intentional.
Yeah.
Before it was just natural, and now you have to do it intentionally. We reinstituted, or we only have one son left at home. He's 16, but we reinstituted game night. So we'll go in the basement. We've got a keg. We have a table. We go play games. It's fun. If friends come over, if sleepovers, friends come over, we'll do game nights. And those 16-year-old boys love it when I play games with them. It's fun. But it has to be intentional, because if I don't say, let's go play games, they go play online games or watch YouTube. So I think that whole new generation, I think my kids, my 3 older kids, they're between 24 and 20. So 24, 22, and 20. I think they're in that in-between generation. They didn't have it growing up, but by the time they were teenagers, they got a phone when they were like 14, 15. Now there's a new generation of kids that have phones when they're 2 or 3 or 5. So, and I think we're probably the last set of parents, I am, that grew up without social media, because there's now kids like my son, who's 24, that are starting to raise kids that have had it most of their life. So it's a very transitional thing right now. But I think being intentional is really important. And we did the same thing. We read every night to our kids, and they absolutely loved it. That's how my kids ended up being bilingual, I think, because I would read in Dutch, my husband would read in English. So, yeah.
On the
Diego,
topic of
there's
on the topic of raising children and how social media affects that, we actually have a viewer from the Netherlands right now, and Rudy says he loves hearing that you raised your children with Dutch culture, but he asked, what are your views on a tradition like Zwarte Piet, and does controversy surrounding topics like these affect social media in your area or the way you've raised your kids in general?
Well, I think that's a great question. And things have evolved since I've left the Netherlands, because you're indoctrinated when you live there and you grow up, and that's all you know. So, when I first moved here and I was in Boston, I was in Philadelphia, we had celebrations in the US with Zwarte Piet. And that's just what you did, because that's all you knew. But I think if you still want to do that and you live in 2021, I think you have your head in the sand, and that's kind of crazy. I think that with the rise of social media, everybody else in the world has seen what the Dutch children see. I think when it was almost like hidden, it was a part of a culture and it was within the confines of a country. I'm not saying it was right, but I think it was more acceptable. And I think when the world opened up because of social media, I think people got different views and different angles to see what it would feel like. I know I certainly have changed my mind. I think that, we shouldn't have Zwarte Piet. I do think it's, no matter how many excuses you have of this is a cultural and this is a children's party, because that's what I hear all the time, say it was wrong and, make it a different color or make it, I don't know. I just think the whole controversy. Now, let me say it this way. I think a lot of Dutch people are not exposed to real racism. And because of that, they don't recognize when it happens. I guess that's a good way to say it. And they don't, and having lived in the South of the US, having had a Black foster son living with us for a year, it's really opened my eyes to that it's everywhere. And that it's in all of us, and that we all have biases that we live with. And to just say it's not there or it's innocent, I think we're way beyond that in 2021.
But it's also indeed bias and prejudice, right? I mean, it's racial bias. A lot of time it's racial bias, not necessarily racism, but it can get into racism quite quickly. I think I do want to share what happened in Suriname with Sinterklaas, because that's a very interesting story. So I think the biggest difference why we managed to get out of the issue quite easily in Suriname is because we don't have the market. But I think what of most people, the economics behind Sinterklaas and even Zwarte Piet, the economics are huge. I mean, it starts in October even. And starting from October on until December, there's this big market filled up with a traditional holiday. And everything is built around it. So the complete economics, we spoke about Albert Heijn earlier and other supermarkets, they jump into it. So it's like this big market, which is connected to tradition, which is kind of this media machine that goes crazy, and it's very big. So it's very hard to let go of tradition. So what happened in Suriname at a certain point is that because we didn't have that economic value to that tradition, we moved to Children's Day. So instead of calling it Sinterklaas, we moved to Children's Day. Basically, the 5th of December in Suriname is Children's Day. And because of that, it was easy to remove the Zwarte Piet with fairy princesses. And princesses, like, it's really easy for us because the actual stores that sell off all these costumes, they could provide costumes for princesses. So all of a sudden, the market dynamics changed. And because we didn't really have the value with things like Pakjesavond and really the intocht like Sinterklaas coming to the country, we don't have that strong tradition as the Netherlands has because it's really part of their culture. We kind of moved away from who's helping out Sinterklaas. It doesn't matter. Let's just put in Disney princesses to help out Sinterklaas. So it was much easier in Suriname to let go of that tradition of this has to be the helper and this is what he has to look like or she has to look like. We just moved it completely in a different direction. Where
that's
it
awesome.
remains
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's really, really neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a way that, but again, I understand it a little bit better because when I studied in the Netherlands, I saw how big the Sinterklaas tradition was. So that made it difficult because I didn't know about the packaging nights like Pakjesavond and those kind of things. So I think people underestimate on one side how hard it is for Dutch people to let go of certain parts of the tradition. Because for me, as a Surinamese person who studied in the Netherlands, the tradition is Sinterklaas. It's not
Mhm.
Zwarte Piet. The tradition is Sinterklaas. Whereas my wife, who was born in the Netherlands, lived in the Netherlands, for her, Zwarte Piet is kind of part of the tradition. Of course, we made certain decisions. Like my kids, certain YouTubers who still go into the Zwarte Piet hype and still try to stuff it down people's throat. I'm telling
Mhm.
my children, we're not watching these YouTubers
Right,
anymore.
right,
You
right.
know,
That makes sense.
but on the other side, the helper is part of the tradition, and I think there's a lot of, we don't, like you said, people are putting their head in the sand and they don't want to face what the real issue is, and they
Mhm.
don't want to work towards the solution. And I think what we've seen is that we are moving towards acceptance and finding better ways or finding solutions. But yeah, you blame somebody for a certain tradition? Like, how, to what extent can you
Well,
blame
and
them for not
yeah,
willing to let go of a tradition?
and I think part of this is everybody does the best they can until they know better, and then they should do better. And I really think that I'm a vegan, right? I ate meat my whole life from the Netherlands. Dairy, eggs, milk. I didn't know any better. I thought that's what you're supposed to eat. And 5 years ago, I watched this movie. My daughter's like, "Let's go vegan." I went vegan. I feel 100 times better. I made a choice not to eat that. But it's like everybody, I remember growing up in the Netherlands saying you have to eat meat to be strong. You have to have milk and eggs to have strong bones. Well, you don't. But you learn that from a young age. And so you do the best you can, but then when you learn more, you can do better. And I think this is a case where the Dutch people know better, but they don't really want to change and they don't want to make those changes even though they know better. And I think that's, until social media came, it was easy because the other part of the world, I mean, people in the US didn't know what Sinterklaas was. They didn't know unless they had, family that happened to immigrate from the Netherlands. Very few people understood it. But now everybody does. A lot of people here know what it is and they know the controversy. So, now that we've all been exposed in the whole world, then I think that it's your responsibility as a human being to do better when you know better. And I think that's what frustrates me. And I'm not saying that about veganism or whatever, but there's just certain things that when you're little that you learn. And I was talking about that earlier when I was, moved here when I was 18. I feel like I was fully formed. I was 100% Dutch. That's never going to change. That is me. But all those things that I learned, it was just, and I watched a really funny, interesting video. It was about eating animals, of course, veganism. But, if you put a bunch of animals in a room and you ask the kids, which one do you want to eat? They don't want to eat any of them. They don't want to eat the cat, the dog, or the pig because they're all cute, right? But at some point, we get conditioned to think that it's okay to eat the pig or the cow or the horse or the chicken, but not the dog or the cat. Well, that's learned behavior. That society teaches you that that's okay. And I think that is part of what's happening with the Zwarte Piet debate. Somebody has to stop this chain of what they're teaching their children. And if the parents aren't taking the responsibility to teach the children, if the schools aren't part of the solution, then this will continue to just go on and on. But at some point, somebody has to say, it comes from a lot of, it's not just parents, it's schools, it's society, it's economics, there's all these different things. But yeah, you have to want to make a change too.
Wow, this one went quite deep, Diego.
Yes.
Sorry about that, guys.
A simple, controversial question, but I think controversial topics at least stir the most interesting conversations because listening to you two, the history on Suriname, me, Zwarte Piet, and Sinterklaas, and how you experience it from moving to Dutch to the US, there's an intricate relationship between culture, economics, and social media. And as you said before, before social media, controversies like these were kind of confined within their own region, country, or whatever isolated area of the world. But we're more connected or more exposed, better said, than ever before through social media. So, and this ties into, I guess, Rudy's follow-up question: does social media do more good or bad? My personal opinion, it depends on how it's being used and received. So I would like to hear your views on how you think this more open, connected, exposed world, how cultures like maybe the prideful Dutch can be impacted through social media or other parts of the world. Are we getting more connected or more disconnected in your view through social media?
I think it's a positive thing. Again, if you use it intentionally. I am part, for example, you talked about homesickness earlier. I'm now part of, for example, a Facebook group that's called Wereldvrouwen. And there's over 20,000 Dutch women that live all over the world that have this Facebook group. It's fantastic. I've been in it for like 5 years, but it's opened my eyes to, there's people living probably in every country of the world, and they're all together. And our tie is that we speak Dutch. We don't have the same experiences growing up. Some of us have left the Netherlands a long time ago. Some only immigrated last month and they want to be part of it. But it's an incredible resource, and it's an incredible place to connect and to communicate. And through that group, I met somebody local who lives just down the road, and now we are friends. I would never have met her had it not been through this Facebook group, because I would never have seen her, but she lives literally 3 kilometers down the road, and she's Dutch. So there's so many good things, right? I'm now we're in COVID. I'm not really able to go out and volunteer. It's really what I love to do. Can't go to church. It's what I love to do, but I can do that through social media. I can attend my old church back in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, attend that because of the internet. I get to volunteer. I have this app on my phone. Guys, if you're watching this, really, really cool. It's called Be My Eyes. It's for visually impaired people. And so they call you, you can answer the phone if it answers. And I have it set to Dutch, which is really cool. Usually around between 4 and 6 for me, which is between 10 and midnight. I get these calls. If I'm not busy, I answer them. And they're visually impaired people in the Netherlands, because the first language is Dutch that I chose. And they need help with chores. Like, my dog threw up. Can you tell me where it is? Or there's a code on this game that I have to put in, but I of course can't read the code. Can you read the code for me? Or I want to heat this up in a microwave. How long do I need to heat it up? Can you read my It's so cool. I'm connected to people in the Netherlands, being able to volunteer and help. So if you're looking at some of these opportunities and these positive ways, I left when I was 18. I have 1 older brother and sister. I have 2 younger brothers. One is 5 years younger. One is 10 years younger. That means that my youngest brother was 8 when I left the Netherlands. Not really a good connection when you're 8 and 18, right? Don't really know each other. But in the last 10 years through social media, we've been able to reconnect and rebuild a bond, me with my own brothers, because of social media. They have a busy life, but we can call with WhatsApp. I'm in the car. I'm calling them. I'm talking to them. These are all very positive things. So I think if you use it, again, intentionally with the right and meeting, really think about who you want to meet. And then the same with you, Jean-Luc. You started this conversation with how we met, but you forgot that I think we met in a group first, in a Facebook group, where you ask everybody, do you know where Suriname is? And I think I was about the only one that said, yeah, I know where it is.
True.
But, I have made some of the best friendships through social media. I go through these conferences. Of course, now this year we can't go. But I don't go to learn things necessarily. I learn to meet people. I will pay a lot of money to go to the conferences because I want to meet these people that normally we just meet through the screen like you and I are doing. But then I get to have dinner with them, have breakfast, go on a walk, sit next to them in a room and ask them questions. There's nothing more important than that. But it connects the online and the real world. But I have made really great friends, like for life friends through social media. So it can be a very positive thing. But I think you have to, moderation and intention, and, being intentional and moderate what you're doing. That's my answer.
Yeah.
Are you still there, Jean-Luc?
Yeah. You go right.
Okay, check your connection while we do the move on. Let's go through some quick comments before we move on. Ashna said she recognized that part of what you said about the social media part, and she's really seeing herself in the being intentional. Yes, balance is key. We got some more people tuning in. Shout out to Joanne. Thank you for tuning in. And we got Marlon. I agree on the exposure of racism because sometimes I think biases are taught by influence. And Tevin tuned in as well, saying Fawa ka Dorien. That's how are you doing in Surinamese.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I think you learned some Surinamese soon enough.
Yeah.
But moving on, you said you've spoken at different conferences. And if I recap the history part of how you got into social media, you started from volunteering for a few years, basically, to learning through the craft. So it's more of a two-part question. The one part, you didn't really do a formal, I guess, marketing social media through the education system. So how would you compare that volunteering experience that you've got, or that volunteering education that you got in social media, compared to other people or other individuals that went through the institutions like universities doing marketing? In your experience, have you seen any differences, nuances in the approaches? Maybe start with that, and then I'll follow up on the conferences part after that.
Sure. I want to say that I feel very fortunate and very lucky that I happened into social media 10 years ago as a career. Like I mentioned before, there wasn't really anybody in my town that was a social media manager. It was kind of a new thing. And I immediately connected to the online social media manager community because I took that online course. So that was a Facebook group and I was able to connect. I was a volunteer with them for 3 years, but I started making money probably the first year with a couple of paid clients. But about 3 years in, I made that decision to go to my first conference. So I flew out to California. That was 5 years in. That was 5 years in for the first time I actually flew out there. But I had gone to some other local conferences. But I think putting those two worlds, kind of the two worlds collided, made it real. But what I learned by volunteering and then starting to work is that this industry has changed so much in 10 years that even if I had gone to school, I think what I missed initially was not anything that I needed for social media, but it was something I needed to run my business. So that's the part I didn't have. My husband has an MBA. He went to business school. I did not. So running my business, I didn't understand. I was good with the social media part. I was good with the marketing part. I got that. I got some clients. But what I didn't understand was scaling my own business. And leadership and how to deal with clients. And I think those are the things that you get in business school. Obviously, Jean-Luc's going like, yeah. So that took me a lot longer to get to. So about 5 years in, I started going to conferences. About 7 years in, I started speaking. And now I'm 10 years in. And in the last year, I have scaled like double of what I have done. So if I'd gone to college and I'd gotten, it might have taken me a lot shorter time to do that, because that's the part that I was missing. I think you can learn marketing, you can learn social media, but those fundamentals that I know Jean-Luc has, and you're running this agency, and that part didn't click with me for quite a few years. I was a freelancer. Yeah, I was a business owner, but I'm not, not really running a business. And just, it was a very different attitude that I had. So that's the part that I was missing. And I'm not saying you can't get that when you don't go get a formal education. But somehow I missed a lot of that. And now I'm here. Now I'm there. It took me a little bit longer. So what you can't, you can. What I'm saying is you can be man-made or self-made. You can, do it without a formal education. You don't have those basic things. Like I would have loved to take a psychology course or leadership seminar or project management. Or, those are all things that I learned way later into my business, probably 6-7 years later. Speaking, writing, copywriting. I mean, things that you really need as a social media manager. Those are the skills much later that I started really working on.
I'm actually nodding because actually I recognize a lot of things, and not necessarily that I think the formal education way is easier or even faster. When I had to decide which study I was going to do, there was no Facebook, there was no LinkedIn, there was no Instagram. All of those things didn't exist. I think 6degrees.com existed. That was and ICQ existed. So I think it's hard because also and I've been a lecturer for a couple of years now on online marketing and social media. And the problem is, I think it's so multidimensional. Like you said, I would have loved to learn psychology because people underestimate the importance of psychology in social media marketing. They just completely underestimate how important it is knowing how the brain works and what parts of the brain you can actually jump into with a social media campaign and which parts of the brain you cannot jump into with a social media campaign unless, and then what does unless until. So I think what does help when you have an educational background like university or college is the thinking level for solutions and problems that you come across, and how you can scientifically find out with numbers and with experiments and research whether something or not works. But that's about it. I mean, I think the biggest advantage for me personally for studying or going to the university and getting my master's, it's more that I did social science, and because I did social science, and it was very broad, the studies that I did, I got to see a lot of more of the social side of social media. And what happened in Suriname, and it must have happened in other countries as well, is that in the beginning, people were tying up social media to ICT. And of course, there is an ICT aspect, but there's also a marketing aspect. So in the beginning, when we were having meetings with clients, um, we would be there in a meeting, and then the management would say like, okay, so this is our ICT person and they will be involved with social media. And that would be somebody that was fixing the printers and the scanners and had like no interest whatsoever coming up with marketing content. So it took a while as well to figure out for these companies like, no, wait, this is not part of the ICT department. It's part of the marketing and communications department. And I think figuring it out, that's what it's been about. And especially if you see how quick things move. Like for instance, if you were on TikTok 3 years ago and you were active and you would post every day, it's getting to 100,000 followers would have been much easier than if you're just starting out now. The people who are already on Clubhouse, I mean, Clubhouse, it could disappear quickly, but those people that are already on Clubhouse have a huge advantage over the people that were waiting for the Android app to come out. So these are kind of things. And like you said, you mentioned it earlier, it moves so quick and the market changes so quickly. And the only consistent thing is actually the human behavior. So I think the experience is in this case much more important than formal education. But of course, also the willingness to adapt. Because if you would be doing the same things that we were doing 5 years ago, uh, we would be bankrupt as a company as well, I think.
Yeah, I think basic skills like communication, project management, those are really good skills. Copywriting, like I mentioned before, but then also it takes a certain person. You have to have empathy. You have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to like talking to people, at least online. You have to be able to read between the lines. I'm beyond a social media manager. I'm also a community manager where I manage online communities where, people might say one thing but really mean another. And, if you're black and white and you're just hearing this only and you can't read between the lines, and, it's almost like being a mom. You have to like, they're saying this, but they really mean that. And as a social media manager, those skills come in really handy when you communicate online, because a lot of emotion gets communicated. It's nonverbal. I think when we speak, only 7% is verbal. 93% of when we communicate is nonverbal. It's you nodding your head and how you look and all those things. So when we're texting, we only see a little bit of what people mean. And so on social media, when you communicate, that's why video does better than written text. But and if you don't understand that part, then, working in social media marketing, you're going to have a much harder time.
Great. And yeah, Tanya sums that up. The emotional intelligence is a key factor to know what drives people and to use in your marketings, for example. But before we go to the other questions, I want to share a bit as well, because I don't have a background in marketing. I don't have a background. I actually did engineering. And so the starting point for you and me are pretty same. Maybe I grew up in a more social media exposed world. But the formal education background I did not have. I did engineering. I was that IT guy kind of thing, but yeah, that didn't really stick. Tried coding. Now I opted for the creative path to create content. That's how we ended up here. But I've learned most of this just through the process of doing and learning. Because as you said, everything changes so fast in this world and you got to adapt. And a key thing I think that people should learn is the ability to learn and to unlearn. Because what you know 10 years ago might not apply now. And you have to be able to unlearn that quickly to adapt what's new and what works. And that psychological aspect as well. I started valuing that. I went to a rabbit hole of reading books on psychology just because it was fascinating to see how, the brain works. I got one book right here, The Psychology of Persuasion. And they talk about the 6 principles of scarcity, social proof, authority. And just the basic understanding, not even going into a deep dive, that awareness already gives you a huge advantage. Maybe advantage isn't the right word, but a huge leap ahead to understand how things can affect, I think, the world in general. Because the most influential people now send out a tweet and the whole world goes crazy. So
True.
that is a controversy in itself.
Yep. Oh, for sure.
But
So,
yeah,
Diego, do you want to
yeah.
pick out a couple of more questions to close out?
Yeah. So I think we can move to the final part, and that's you talked about speaking in conferences, and you go to these conferences to connect to people and not necessarily the content. And I think I'm pretty similar. In the beginning, was like, okay, yeah, it's fun to learn, but I volunteered for these things just to meet people as well now. But that ties into, I guess, the final part. Could you share with us, I guess, your first conference experience, and to round that off, what the future social media marketing trends do you see, having experienced a lot of conferences for the foreseeable future?
All right, so let me start with what I see is happening already, and I'm sure you guys are seeing the same thing. As much as we go live and as much as we go, into the world and everybody can talk to us and see us, I think a lot of the future in social media that's happening now is private. And when people hear me say that, they're like, "What?" Jean-Luc and I, we met in real life, but then the next conversation was private, was through Facebook Messenger and then LinkedIn Messenger. And that's where you make appointments. You say, let's hop on a Zoom. In LinkedIn, in Instagram, that's where the conversations are going. That's what's happening. People want to feel valued, want to feel special. One of the things that I do as a marketer, when somebody I know or is an influencer or a friend or somebody I've met at a conference and I want to reconnect with them when it's their birthday, instead of posting on their wall, I will just grab my phone and I will make like a 30-second video and say, "Oh, I want to show you this. Isn't this like cool? That's my Vermont license plate. That's my phone." But I'll make them a little video and say, "Hey, I was thinking about you. I know it's your birthday today. I know you're going to have lots of messages, but I really enjoyed meeting you. And I just want you to know I'm thinking about you on your birthday." And people love it. And it's that little bit of extra thing that you do that builds those relationships and that continues those relationships. But it has to be genuine, of course. So my first conference experience was actually in Myrtle Beach. It was a local conference in 2013, and Jay Baer, Jay Baer came, and because I really hadn't taken any marketing money, 3 years in, wasn't making that much money to go anywhere, but now there's a marketing conference in Myrtle Beach. He came, and because I was local, I did stalk all of the speakers. And so I was tweeting with them. And so while I was at the conference, I'm like, "Can I have a picture with you?" So every time I go to a conference and Jay Baer is there, he and I take a picture together because we've been at a lot of several conferences. But while I was there, by accident, I was sitting in a room and people were talking about going out to dinner. And so I went with them to dinner. And it was like 8 of us, and somebody from North Carolina, somebody from South Carolina, different places. And we went to dinner. And that was my first aha moment. Nothing happened at the conference, but as soon as we sat down and had a meal, we became friends. And I've always remembered that when you sit and break bread with somebody, you become friends. And the same thing happens in social media marketing world. I went back in 2017. I've been 2015 all the way through. In 2017, I happened to get to a table, 12. I just signed up on a Google sheet. I'm going to go to this dinner. And out of that dinner with 12 people, me being one of 12, I got 3 speaking engagements. 3. Just by being there, breaking bread with these people, making meaningful conversations, and sitting there for 2 hours. And that's where the magic happens. It's in the private conversation. So that's really what I see that's happening. It can't just be other people coming to you. You've got to reach out. You got to, and of course, be genuine. But and be giving, be sharing. You can't keep all the secret sauce to yourself, guys. If you're, you got to pull people up and you've got to, every once in a while get a handout, but you got to give, you got to share what works. You've got to share, about conferences and invite people, include people, and just like you would do in real life, but that needs to happen on social media as well. And when you are like that, it'll come back 100-fold, when you are genuine and you share and you invite and you include. That would be what I'm seeing, and that's happening, and that works really well.
Interesting. I think it's interesting because the idea of sharing your knowledge freely is something that a lot of people have problems with. Just a quick tangent, because it's something that we struggle with a lot in Suriname, is not willing to tell people your idea because you're worried it's gonna get stolen by somebody else. And for me, it's quite easy. Either the idea is that good that you patent it and that you make effort to patent it and sell the idea to somebody else, or just be happy that somebody else actually does something with the idea, because otherwise nothing will happen with it. But it's a scare for us to to tell ideas here in Suriname because we're just afraid somebody else is going to run with it. Well, if your idea is good, in the end, it's still about the execution. But yeah, that's something that I just wanted to get off my plate. There are a lot of comments now going into the IT part. Of course, we have a lot of viewers that work at the IT departments, and there are even stories of people walking up to the IT department and asking them if they can fix the water cooker. That's how extreme it gets. And Gregory also is now into social media, coming from being a system manager IT. So he recognizes some of the problems.
Cool.
So, any final thoughts? Because the questions came in at the end, and we don't want to make this episode too long. So maybe can we do a short summary, and then we'll give the last word to Doreen if she has anything else that she'd like to share with us. Jean-Luc?
So do you want to do a quick summary of the questions that still popped up?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the questions that we've not missed. First of all, Joel, you're going to have to explain what the potato comment is because I missed that one. Secondly, Nathaniel asked what human needs are answered by social media. Joel also mentioned the mentality of the IT guy having to do everything that's barely IT related. Sounds scary familiar. And I do think I'm going to leave Marlon's comment to the last because I think that's one we should quickly answer. Stephanie says she can attest to the psychology background being a huge advantage in communications. So thanks for sharing that, Stephanie, because that's indeed something that we underestimate. Nathaniel also wanted to talk a little bit about AI. Marvin wanted to talk a little bit also about the social media influencers and how they are becoming kind of the new marketeers. And Tanya agrees that saying that some things we can't do alone, telling your ideas out loud could be beneficial. I think it definitely could. I agree there. But the comment that I saved for last is, do you think volunteering or conferences is the right approach after migrating to grow your network, and platforms that are the right approach before migrating? So I think this is a very specific question. This is a question about migrating to the US, and how can you, I guess, prepare yourself as well, and what are the right approaches? If for some of us, like, we're young, we're thinking of starting a new career, Suriname is limited in some ways, so we want to go to the US, and what could be approach for us getting into the field of social media? And this attests for people that just want to migrate, but I guess also for Surinamese entrepreneurs who want to jump into the US market. Like, what should be an approach, or what could be an approach for us?
There is no better way to meet the right people at a conference than volunteering. And, that big social media marketing conference, I know you volunteer there too, but I have met the best and the most awesome people through volunteering. My last job there last year was I was a speaker handler, which meant I got to intimately meet Mark Schaefer and Maury Smith, and some of these awesome keynote speakers, and I got to make them tea and walk them to their room and sit in and hold their backpack, and meet the other part to that is you then meet the other volunteers who are also in the same industry. And so it's a great way to be at the conference, be part of a conference, not spend all that money on a ticket, but also position yourself. And it's all about serving. When you're there, you gotta pay, have your time there. But that's really a great way. But if you want to get into the industry, in the marketing industry, and you're in Suriname and you're looking to connect with people in the US, just remember they're human. And humor goes a long way, interest goes a long way. Read somebody's Twitter bio before you tweet at them. I had somebody tweet at me a couple of years ago when I said I had 3 dogs that was selling some kind of dog leash where you can leash 3 dogs. We had a wonderful conversation. Didn't end up buying the leash, but he looked at my bio and he had the right, idea. So read the bio, share content. Sharing and liking content is free, guys. It's a free thing to do. It's just your time. Like, share, comment, get to know people, go to Twitter chats, in a nice way, contribute to the conversation, and people start knowing who you are. Again, being that giver, being part of the community. And then once they know who you are and they welcome you back, you've been to a Twitter chat 4 weeks in a row, you can send that private message and say, hey, I've really enjoyed it. If part of your Twitter chat, I have a question, and start the conversation, go private. That's when you go private. But it's really all about genuine interest and knowing where you want to go. I think that also helps. A friend of mine gave this as advice, on LinkedIn and Facebook. You should never just scroll. Figure out, your top people who you want to meet, the people that are at your level that you want to connect with, and then you have your friends. So your friends are going to share whatever you say or do on LinkedIn, right? They're just, you have a funny video, they're always going to come and share. Then your colleagues, you might need to tag them to get their attention. But then you have these upper level people that you want to meet. You go to their profile, you get a list ready, and you click on their link, you go to their content, and you intentionally engage with them. That's how you do it. So you can do that on Facebook, you can do that on LinkedIn, but, having an idea of where you want to go helps. The year that I really jump-started my speaking career, and I'm just going to tell you how I did it. I made a plan. I'm going to speak on 12 stages. So in order to do that, I had to have one speaking engagement a month because I needed to build my resume. So I reached out to anybody I knew that had a conference or worked at a conference, and I was able to do it. I got to 12 stages. So the next year I could start charging. But if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a plan, you're not going to make to your goal, right? Because a plan has to have a goal. So you do the same intentionally when you're on social media, when you want to get into the industry, when you get to meet people. It's not overnight. You got to put in the work, and you got to be genuine, and you got to reach out and make those connections.
Wow, that's great advice to close off with.
Yes, and I'd like to add, it isn't as intimidating as it may seem, because as Dorien said, there's human, and sometimes they even want that break from all that attention and something private. I'm just speaking from experience because I'm in a fellowship right now, and yeah, at first it seemed intimidating if you go to the roster of who's in it, but once you start having the conversation, it just flows. It's like you're friends for a while now, and that's what you gotta aim for, that building intentional relationships. And I think Doreen hit all the right nails with her last statements there.
Yes. So quickly, two more comments. One, the international stay-at-home option is Hive. Joel, thank you for the Hive plug. Joel, I'm gonna pass the Hive torch to you tonight. So it's just so you're aware of that. And Gregory, I missed the podcast. Damn. So I think this is the plug where you quickly can tell the people where they can watch the podcast, Diego, and then of course we're gonna ask Doreen as well how people can connect with her.
Yeah, so to close up, as you guys know, we're live every Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Surinamese time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The recordings will be up on the website the next Saturday, and all mainstream podcasting platforms, streaming platforms. So check that out, or tell your friends if they've missed that, so you can watch the full episode. Furthermore, I just pulled a blank here. I think we could throw it to Doreen now to tell us what she's up to, if should look forward to anything, and where we can find her online. And maybe you guys can even reach out to her.
I would love that. I would love that. So I'm most active on Facebook. And I think there really only is one, Dorien Morin van Dam. So you find me, that's me with orange glasses. That helps. And then the second platform I'm really active on is LinkedIn. I would love to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a note and say, hey, I listened to the podcast, or want to connect because I'm friends with Jean-Luc or Diego, whatever you want to tell me. But then I'll accept your request, connection request. Those are really the places. You can message me on Facebook if you have a follow-up question. That's fine too. Again, I'm a community manager, so I really spend a lot of time online on Facebook. So that's fine. If you want to email me, my website is Morin Media, so it's Dorien at morinmedia.com. So any of those, yeah, there you go. So on Instagram and Twitter, I'm Morin Media. So that's also my website, morinmedia.com. So any of those ways will get to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doreen. I'm gonna leave in one more comment. This was an epic interview, and we should have Doreen and Austin in once again. Yes, people, we're definitely going to have a feature for them in the next year. Definitely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Doreen.
Thank you for having me. And I'm coming to Suriname.
We're looking forward to it.
Yes.
This has been
when the world's open.
Definitely. This has been Social Confoes. We'll be back next week, Tuesday at 9 o'clock Surinamese time. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.